So she's Albert's girl. I seen them together 3 times. Oh, so now it's 3 times. Paulo looked down at his fingers for confirmation. Yeah. Well, what's she doing working a straight job then? What else is she gonna do, Dion said, retire? No, but Albert's married, Dion said. Who's to say how long a party gal lasts on his arm? Oh, she strike you as a party gal? Dion slowly thumbed the cap off a bottle of Canadian gin, his flat eyes on Joe. She didn't strike me as anything but a gal got me a key to a money room. I couldn't even tell you what color her hair was. I couldn't, it was black, Joe said, kind of blue-black. She's Albert's girl. Dion poured them all a drink. Albert's girl. All right then, Joe said, and took the drink. Everybody okay? All right. I have Russell's girl gladiator disease, and I was like, are you entertained? She didn't come into the shoelace for the next 3 nights. Joe was sure of it. He'd been in there, open and close, every night. Albert came in wearing one of his signature pinstripe off-white suits, like he was in Lisbon or something. He wore them with brown fedoras that matched his brown shoes, which matched the brown pinstripes. Once the snow came, he wore brown suits with off-white pinstripes, an off-white hat, and white and brown spats. But Joe imagined, for the most part, he'd be easy to gun down at night. Shoot him in an alley from 20 yards away with a cheap pistol. He wouldn't even need a street lamp to see that white turn red. Albert, Joe thought, as Albert glided past the bar stool with the shoelace on the 3rd night. I could kill you if I knew the first thing about killing. Problem was, Albert didn't go into alleys much, and when he did, he had 4 bodyguards with him. And even if you did get through them, and you did kill him, and Joe, no killer, wondered why the fuck he found himself thinking about killing Albert White in the first place. All you managed to do would be to derail a business empire for Albert White's partners, who included the police, the Italians, the Jew mobs in Manhattan, and several legitimate businessmen, including bankers and investors with interests in Cuban and Florida sugarcane. Derailing a business like that in a city this small would be like feeding zoo animals with fresh cuts on your hand. Albert passed him again on the way to the bathroom from the bathroom that 3rd night. The man's flesh as white as the suit. The man's lips as red as the blood that flowed into and out of his heart. The 4th night, after the Gillette robbery, Joe followed her home from work. She walked off the waterfront and up onto Broadway with the fat office manager. At Broadway station, the manager walked to a bench on the streetcar side and she descended into the subway. Joe followed her through the turnstiles and down another set of steps and onto a northbound train. It was crowded on the train, hot, but he never took his eyes off her, which was a good thing because she left the train 1 stop later at South Station. South Station was a transfer station with 3 subway lines, 2 L lines, a streetcar line, 2 bus lines, and a commuter rail all converged. Stepping out of the car and onto the platform turned him into a billiard ball on the brick. He was bounced, pinned, and bounced again. He lost sight of her. He wasn't a tall man like his brother, one of whom was tall and the other abnormally so. But thank God he wasn't short, just medium. He stepped up on his toes and tried pressing through the throng that way. It made the going slower, but he got a flash of her blue-black hair bobbing by the transfer tunnel to the Atlantic Avenue elevated. He reached the platform just as the cars arrived. She stood 2 doors ahead of him in the same car when the train left the station and the city opened up in front of them, its blues and browns and brick red deepening in the onset of dusk. Windows in the office buildings had turned yellow. Street lamps had come on, though block by block there seemed to be little logic to which block was illuminated first. The harbor bled out from the edges of the skyline. Emma leaned against the window and Joe watched it all unfurl behind her. She stared out blankly at the crowded car, her eyes lighting on nothing but wary just the same. When they passed through Battery March stations and rattled over the north end, Joe looked down at the ghetto, teeming with Italians, Italian people, Italian dialects, Italian customs and food. And he couldn't help but think of his oldest brother Danny, the Irish cop who loved the Italian ghetto so much he lived and worked there. Growing up, Joe ignored his brother. Then he'd come to hate him. Now he mostly didn't think about him. When he did, he had to admit he missed his laugh. Down the other end of the car, every woman was saying, excuse me, as she worked her way toward the doors. Joe looked out the window and saw that they were approaching City Square in Charlestown. No wonder she hadn't gotten rattled with a gun pointed at her. A gun wouldn't scare a girl around here. In Charlestown, they brought 38s to the dinner table, used the barrels to stir their coffee. All right, there's just a scene of Little Skip where he basically hangs in an alley and watches. He goes into a speakeasy. he watches to wait until he can figure out what the code word is to get into the speakeasy. So he's figured out the code word, he goes inside. At the bar, Joe sat down the end closest to the door where a woman with fat that hung off her arms like pregnant bellies served him a bucket of warm beer that tasted a little of soap and a little of sawdust, but not a lot like beer or anything like alcohol. He looked for Emma Gould in the basement gloom, saw only dock workers, a couple of sailors, and a few working girls. A piano sat against the brick wall under the stairs, unused, a few keys broken. This was not the kind of speak that went in for entertainment much beyond the bar fight that would open up between the sailors and the dock workers once they realized they were short 2 working girls. She came out of the door behind the bar, tying a kerchief off behind her head. She traded her blouse and skirt for an off-white fisherman's sweater and brown tweed trousers. She walked the bar, emptying ashtrays and wiping spills, and the woman who served Joe his drink removed her apron and went back to the door behind the bar. When she reached Joe, her eyes flicked on his near-empty bucket, and she said, "You want another?" "Sure." She glanced at his face and didn't seem fond of the result. "Who told you about this place?" "Denny Cooper." "Don't know him," she said. That makes 2 of us, Joe thought, wondering where the fuck he'd come up with such a stupid name. Denny? Why did he call the guy lunch? "He's from Emory." She wiped the bar in front of him, still not moving to get his drink. "Yeah?" "Yeah, we worked at Chelsea side of the Mystic last week. Dredge work?" She shook her head. "Anyway, Denny pointed across the river, told me about this place, said you serve good beer." "Now I know you're lying." "Because someone said you serve good beer?" She stared at him the way she had in the payroll office, like she could see the intestines growing inside him, the pink of his lungs, the thoughts that journeyed between the folds of his brain. "The beer's not that bad," he said and raised his bucket. "I had some once in this place, this one time. I swear to you, butter doesn't melt on your tongue, does it?" she said. "Miss? Does it?" He decided to try resigned indignation. "I'm not lying, miss, but I can go. I can certainly go." He stood. "What do I owe you for the first one?" "2 dimes. She held out her hand and he placed the coins in them and she placed them in the pocket of her man's trousers. "You won't do it." "What?" he said. "Leave. You're going to be so impressed that you said you'd leave, but I'll decide you're a clear-talk Charlie and ask you to stay." "Nope." He shrugged into his coat. "I'm really going." She leaned into the bar. "Come here." He cocked his head. She crooked a finger at him. "Come here." He moved a couple of stools out of the way and leaned into the bar. "You see those fellas in the corner, sitting by the table made out of the apple barrel?" He didn't need to turn his head. He'd seen them the moment he walked in. 3 of them, dock workers by the look of them, shipmasts for shoulders, rocks for hands, eyes you didn't want to catch. "I see him," he said. "They're my cousins. You see a family resemblance, don't you?" "No." She shrugged. "You know what they do for work?" Their lips were close enough that if they'd opened their mouths and unfurled their tongues, the tips would have met. "I have no idea." "They find guys like you who lie about guys named Denny, and they beat them to death." She inched her elbows forward and their faces moved closer. "Then they throw the bodies in the river." Joe's scalp and the backs of his ears itched. "That's quite the occupation." "Yeah," she said. "Beats robbing payrolls, though, doesn't it?" For a moment, Joe forgot how to move his face. "Say something clever," Emma Gould would say. "I want to hear something slick and clever. Maybe about that sock you put in my mouth." Joe said nothing. "And while you're thinking of things," Emma Gould said, "think of this. They're watching us right now. If I tuck this earlobe, you won't make the stairs." He looked at the earlobe she'd indicated with a flick of her pale eyes. The right one looked like a chickpea, but softer. He wondered what it would taste like first thing in the morning. Joe glanced down at the bar. "And if I pull this trigger?" She followed his gaze and saw the pistol he placed between them. "You won't reach your earlobe." Her eyes left the pistol and rose up his forearm in such a way he could feel the hairs parting. She sculled across the center of his chest, then up his throat and over his chin. When she found his eyes, hers were fuller and sharper, lit with something that had entered the world centuries before civilized things. I get off at midnight, she said. I